Good day. The situation of the coronavirus hasn't changed much. The world is still gripped by this pandemic. As of today, about 6,337,343 people have been infected, with 369,872 deaths, with 2.51 million people who have recovered. The European continent and North America remain the hardest hit, with over 1.9 in North America, and in Europe 1.9 as well. Almost 2 million people in North America, with the U.S. Counting close to 1.8 million affected cases, with 103,781 deaths in the U.S. alone. And scientists are saying that the epicenter has shifted to South America, where Brazil has about 449,966 cases already, with 28,849 deaths. But the news in Cameroon is that schools will be starting tomorrow, and we will focus on that in the course of this program, but touch on Corona, because how will schools start amid the coronavirus? School authorities, the government has reassured the school communities that they should implement the preventive measures and reduced the number of pupils and students who are supposed to be in school to just examination classes, which, to my opinion, is manageable. But the school authorities are here. They are going to tell us how manageable that is and what precautions they have been taken. We also have a politician amongst us and who will guide us on government's decision. And we'll have our fourth guest who will be joining us in the course of the program. But let me just introduce those who are here already. We have Dr. Emmanuel Yimbo. You are an educationist. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Joe. It's always a pleasure to be on Press Hour.
We have Professor Elvis Ngole. I'm inviting you today as a political scientist, not as a politician. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Martin Gongo Bate. He is the vice principal of the Baptist High School in Yaoundé. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like us to begin straight away. It is a big challenge, Dr. Yimbo, for you to start schools tomorrow, right?
Joe, permit me say that...
you are of the secondary education.
Secondary education. Yeah. Permit me say that I was because yes. I just recently got transferred to higher education.
Okay.
So
higher education will be starting tomorrow as well.
Yes, sure. I must say that this is one of the greatest challenges that the educational sector would definitely be facing. Reason being that we are faced with a pandemic in which we ourselves understand very little about, So it's definitely not going to be easy. But that notwithstanding, schools must go on. Schools must go on. There are provisions that have been put in place. There are certain practical modalities that have been put in place to see how we can manage this pandemic and at the same time be able to allow our kids to go to school.
Is it not a good thing that the resumption was limited only to examination classes, which makes it, I would say, manageable at this level in terms of the number of students that will be coming?
It is indeed a good thing, because if you look at the sizes of our examination classes, they are smaller than the entire school. And looking at the school infrastructure, it is much easier now to separate the students into groups of 24. In that case, only the examination classes can use the entire school campus.
Okay.
So for schools like my school, BHSRY, that is entirely boarding school, the challenges are even double.
Yes, we'll come to the challenges of the peculiarities because of your institution. Okay. But when you have a situation like that, will work not be increased for the teachers? They will have to work extra hard, Prof.
Yes.
Because instead of teaching one class of about 40 or 50, they will have to teach 3 or 4 different classes. Yeah.
Indeed. When you are faced with a challenge such as the health pandemic that we've got in the coronavirus, the entire nation counts on the leadership of the state. And we have seen in Cameroon that the state has shown strong leadership in the way that the head of state, president, took on this challenge, and the measures that his government, that he had instructed and the government has put in place. And right now, many sectors are affected. And we're talking here of the educational sector. And we're glad, my co-panelists, distinguished co-panelists, I think that I'm very glad that the educationalists have taken on the challenge and they are ready, conscious of the measures that the government has taken, has announced. Because at the end of the day, as educationists, they know better than I do, the worst thing an educationalist will want to see is to see a young child lose his or her future. They would like academic year. They would. I mean, this is what I know about educationalists. It is for them a calling, and not only a professional calling, but they are conscious about that. That you want to make sure you protect the future of these children. And I know that they are ready to take on the challenge, knowing very well that the state has taken the measures and the state is behind them. And I'm very glad to see that we all have to support them, because really it's not going to be an easy challenge.
I see. I would have asked the question, but you answered it already on why, what would have guided government's decision, giving it to ask the examination classes or schools to start. And luckily, it's been limited just to examination classes, so it's manageable. But you just made mention of the fact that you are a boarding school. Is it more difficult to manage a boarding school than a day school in a situation like this?
In my own opinion, I feel the only problem in a boarding school is the entry of the students.
Arrivals.
Arrivals. Because if proper screening is done upon arrival and the students are kept without them having contact with the outside, then the only place of constitution should be the teachers, who have the right to go out and come in.
Okay.
As long as we control the teachers day after, it is much better in boarding schools than in day schools. That students, teachers go and come.
Yes. Now, what dispositions have you put in place for day schools, or when you talk with your colleagues, with them, like he is saying, it's manageable at the level of boarding schools. If you screen them and they come in free, then you can at least, it's some degree of confinement.
Actually, I would like to say that the challenges for a day school teacher or for a day institution is definitely not the same like the challenges in a boarding school, like he rightly said, because they are dealing with a confined and a specific group of students. They live there, they sleep there, they eat there, everything happens there. But with us, our students have to come from their homes, come meet us, we interact, we teach them, and then they have to go back to their parents and then come back the next day. Without the, I would like to say that it's a very, very difficult challenge for us. It is a difficult challenge, and I want to say that the government, the Ministry of Secondary Education, is doing all it can to make sure that the necessary dispositions are in place to ensure an effective takeoff for classes come tomorrow Monday. But the challenges are extremely enormous. Extremely enormous, because this is not something that we have witnessed before. It's a new experience, and we are all in the process of experimenting, you know. So definitely, to the best of my knowledge, there are certain challenges that we are definitely going to face in the field.
Now, because what are some of the preoccupations which come to mind already when you envisage some of the things tomorrow, and what were you discussing at the level of your staff meeting to say, okay, these are the possible challenges and these are the possible solutions we are proposing? Thank
you very much, Joe, for that question. It's a very important question. The first thing is, at the level of we have been asked to reduce the number per class to 24 to 25 maximum. You all agree with me that we have infrastructural issues. There are some lycées in town here, in the other regions where, take for example, let me give you a practical example. I was a teacher of Terminal Bilang, Premier Bilang. I had 148 students in my class.
Wow.
So when you reduce Premier Bilang now to 25 maximum, it means that you are creating approximately 5 different classes. So when you create 5 different classes, you are increasing you are increasing my number of hours. If I am the lone teacher who is supposed to teach us 5 different classes, or you need to bring in 5 extra teachers to be able to handle the 5 different classes which the pandemic has obliged us to be able to create. That's one of the major challenges. The second challenge we have is with the attitude of our students and maybe even our parents. Students are coming from outside, and then we are supposed to start classes at 7:30. Okay, assume that we have guys with thermometers or whatever to change the temperature of students or whatever. How many of them, a school like Lycée Ngwakile, where I'm drawing my inspiration from, if my memory is not failing me, we should be in the neighborhood of 9,000 to 10,000 students.
No, you have early examination classes.
Yes. Okay, now, reduce it to examination classes, we'll be talking about 4,000 to 5,000 students.
What?
Will you be able to...
That much?
Take Lycée Leclerc, take Lycée Tukebe, they are good. Take Lycée Colbison. What are we talking about?
Extra classes. The delegate told us.
What are we talking about?
Lycée Leclerc, examination classes only.
Only. Which means after classes. Grounding the non-examination classes, we have to create an extra capacity of 58
different rooms. I'm sure they are going to move to other institutions or
other campuses.
Definitely. Another challenge we have, Joe, for now, we have been made to understand that only the primary school kids will get free face masks. And the government, I was in the ministry 2 days ago, and I saw the ministry trying to disperse some basic equipment to be able to ensure that the hand sanitizers and the rest. Now, in the case where parents have been asked to buy face masks for their kids, and we have been made to understand, I'm not a health expert, that the face mask can last for 3 to 4 to 5 hours maximum. The question you want to ask yourself...
Most of them are washable now because they are made out of
So now the student has to be in school from 7:30 to perhaps 3:30 to 4 o'clock. Would the student have time to go home, wash the face mask before it expires, and then iron it with whatever before? That, again, is another major, challenge.
You just raised something there which is very important in terms of infrastructure. Yeah. But I was following, I think, on the media, and somebody said that they have organized their own in such a way, their own school in such a way that some will come from 7 to 12 and others from 12:30 to 6 p.m. So they can work on the same campus.
Possible. But like I'm saying, take hand sanitizers and the face masks like I was already raising that issue as a major challenge. What happens if we run out of hand sanitizers? What happens when a teacher in front of a class and then a student falls or a student loses his or her breath because the student has symptoms of COVID? Is it the teacher who abandoned the student, rush to go call a health expert to come and attend to the
Have you not been given tips on how to handle?
We have been given tips on how to handle that. What is the security of the teacher? What guarantee is there that if that teacher goes in the course of trying to help that child and the teacher himself get infected with the COVID, what happens to the teacher? Is there any social insurance or
the government is taking
security
care of
to be able to take care of that teacher?
The COVID-19 victims, people who are sick of COVID-19.
Accepted that the victims will be taken care of. What in the case where the teacher, in the course of trying to help the student, gets contaminated and ends up dying? Are there any provisions that have been put in place for the government to be able to take care of the family of that teacher and all of that? So the challenges are enormous, Joe.
Yes, we'll handle that later. I'm sure the authorities know exactly because some of the trade unionists
they raised some of these issues, and these were pertinent issues where they said these are the things that need to be taken. We equally have an issue of the cost content.
Okay.
You know, some of the trade unionists were arguing that we should evaluate the students, even in terms of public exams, on the basis of what was taught in the first and the second semester. Because their fear is that if we have to get into this short or less than 2 months, and we have to compact the students with so much information and all of that, we might disfavor the students, especially those who never had access to the online teaching that was taking place in CRTV and other media.
Okay.
So they are thinking that we should concentrate on what was taught in the first and the second semester so that there's a fair ground and there's a level platform to be able to evaluate the students.
Okay.
That, again, too, is another challenge.
I'd like us to listen to what the Prime Minister said concerning the back to school and the measures which government has taken. When we'll come back, we'll continue with our discussion.
During his declaration on Friday, Prime Minister Joseph John Gute officially announced the resumption date for schools in Cameroon after over 2 months of suspension because of the coronavirus.
The President of the Republic, His Excellency Paul Biya, has decided that the resumption of classes at all levels of education as well as in professional schools and vocational centers will take place on Monday, June 1st, throughout the national territory. I would like to point out, with regard to primary education, that this resumption concerns exclusively the pupils of Class 6 for the Anglophone subsystem and cours moyenne deuxième année for the French-speaking subsystem. As regards secondary education, the resumption of classes will be gradual, starting with upper sixth and terminal from the 1st of June 2020. As far as higher education is concerned, the programming of lectures, tutorials, and practical work will be carried out according to the flexibility specific to each university and in accordance with the adjusted academic calendar. As for professional schools and vocational training centers, the resumption of classes will consider the specificities of these institutions.
Joseph John Gute equally highlighted measures which have been put in place to ensure the safety of learners.
The cleaning and disinfection of the various establishments have begun and will be stepped up with the support of the specialized services of the Ministry of Public Health. In addition, at the behest of the Ministry of Scientific Research and Innovation, protective masks and hand sanitizers have been produced locally and made available to the administrations of the education sector. Other health kits have been distributed to schools thanks to a special donation from the head of state.
The Prime Minister once more underscored the gravity of the COVID-19 pandemic and measures which have been put in place to ensure a better management of the disease.
The number of people testing positive for COVID-19 has risen sharply in recent weeks. This evolution is due while the number of COVID-19 patients who have recovered their health is constantly rising. This is proof that the strategy implemented by the government under the impulsion of the head of state should be pursued.
The Prime Minister also announced the extension of measures taken previously to control the COVID-19 pandemic in Cameroon.
The President of the Republic has also decided to extend for an additional 15 days and possibly renewable the measures still in force.
Prime Minister Joseph John Gute ended with reassurances that the government is doing everything to ensure a smooth resumption of classes in the country.
We'd like to welcome Franklin Bayen, who just joined us. Prof, he was just talking about certain measures and the activities of
the syndicates. After all, they're actually syndicates of they're teachers. They're also teachers, and the Ministry of Secondary Education deals with teachers and students. And so, whatever concerns that the syndicates, the minister expressed the willingness to work with everyone so that they work together. After all, the challenge is such that we have to work together.
We have to have a concerted effort.
We have to have a concerted effort. So the syndicate should know that their concerns are also the concerns of the ministry, and they are actually the concerns of all of us in the public. We are with them. We're all together, because this challenge really has shown us that we should be humble enough to know that we are all together in facing one enemy, an enemy who doesn't know, or which doesn't know the color of or the age of anyone. So we think that it is all right that the syndicates that is made up of teachers have concerns, and these concerns are genuine, and we have a ministry headed by a minister who is also willing and open to work with the syndicates. There are 3 different ministers. There are 3, and the others are also. And the Prime Minister has shown by his method of working that he is willing to give all the orientation and support to make sure that they succeed in making sure that we don't waste the future of these children and we don't have jeopardize their health.
Yes, Joe, I just wanted to add that while we are talking about primary and maybe secondary education, to an extent it's even possible to be able to contain then because we're talking only exclusively of examination classes. When it gets to higher education, it's a completely different ballgame. Completely different ballgame, because there are some classrooms we have as many as 1,000 to 1,500 students that are supposed to sit for a particular course. Now you start asking yourself, take the situation of the University of Yaoundé 1, for example, that you have a classroom of 1,000, 1,200 students in a sociology 1 class or in an anthropology 1 or an LMF 1 class. And you are obliged by the circumstances in which we find ourselves to separate them into maximum groups of 25. I think, how do you go about the mathematics? Where do you get infrastructure to be able to manage them? Where do you even get the manpower? At the time when we are even struggling, the university is struggling to get in new lecturers because of the deficiency of teaching staff. How do you separate a 1,550 or 1,500 capacity of students into 25, in groups of 25, and then you'll be able to get lecturers to be able to manage those subgroups that you've created? It's a serious issue of infrastructure, both in the secondary and most especially in higher education, is going to be a very, very serious challenge. Yeah. We are assuming that those in higher education are mature enough, they can be able to manage the preventive measures that will be able to put in place, putting on their masks, washing their hands regularly, being able to do 1 or 2 things. So we are working on that probability option. Okay. Without that, we are moving towards a major pandemic. A major disaster, if you prefer me to put it.
We are already in the pandemic, so we are not moving to anywhere. Yes. The pandemic is already here. Yeah. Now, maybe you listen to them. Your reaction to the fact that the school authorities already have taken all the necessary dispositions, especially at the level of the secondary education and primary education, where only examination classes will resume. But at the higher education, like he said, those are more mature people, and they can be able to handle some of the practical measures, so that's preventive measures that have been put in place by government. Frankly,
did you say that the lower sections they've taken all the necessary measures?
No, they have taken the necessary measures from what the two educationists are saying.
Well, I do not think they have taken the necessary measures. They say they have, and they always say they have, and we know the risks that are involved. I heard the Prime Minister in his statement yesterday say how bad the situation has gotten to, how the numbers are increasing by leaps and bounds. I didn't hear him say which extra measures were being taken better than what we had before the numbers began to grow by leaps and bounds. So I do not see any effort being made to contain. You mind you that this whole thing is to contain first. We don't have the containment measures. It's getting out of hand. And then we are now going to add insult to injury by sending kids who, especially those very young ones, I don't want to repeat what others have said, but the risk is that, like he says, those in higher education are older, are more mature, can handle certain things, which is no guarantee in itself. But the children, and because we understand that for some reason they don't get easily infected like we would, but when they are, that they cannot fall sick, like the experts call it, they are asymptomatic. They would pick up the infection, take home to their parents. Another thing is the teachers are exposed to risk. I heard Dr. Yimbu saying, what is the guarantee for their health? They, the lecturers. I am in higher education. I teach. I'm furthering my studies. I don't want to have an academic year that's wasted. Sure. But the problem is not about going back to school. The problem is about how much is being done to contain this pandemic. And I think very little is being done. And that means that we're going to aggravate the situation in a way. When it goes to the teachers and bounces back to the children, there's a bounce-off effect, which is what a lot of commentators around the world are talking about. When it bounces off and comes back to where you think you have contained, then it comes back. So if parents have a certain awareness and the kids go to school and bring it to them, it goes out of hand. Okay. It is a very risky situation.
The way you speak is as if the disease is in schools, which is not the case.
No, what I'm saying, Joe, what I'm saying is the disease is not in schools. The disease is everywhere. Children are asymptomatic. They may pick it up from town, on their way to school.
Not necessarily.
On their way to school. They may get it from teachers who are infected, or they may bring it to the teachers. The teachers will take it home. The chain is just complicated.
Okay.
And they may pick it up from the teachers and take it back to their parents.
Okay. We have heard your preoccupation, but the way he speaks, he paints a more dark picture, which one would be thinking that, the epidemiologist the other day said that one advantage we have is that we are not in an endemic situation where corona is all over. The air you breathe is corona everywhere. The food you eat is corona. That's where the epidemiologists say they are fighting to contain and not to get to that level.
Right.
And that's what the Prime Minister, in speaking the other day, said that when the government relaxed the measures to be able to help out the more vulnerable part of the population, people thought that. And so is it not, like what he's saying, is it not trying to give reason to those who think that schools wouldn't have started?
Yeah, the first thing is that we have to appreciate the fact that the government insists on the measures that have been taken, because if none of these measures, probably would have been in a situation worse than we are in today. But the government still believes in these measures. And the fact that the government took the measures the other day to soften the effects or the impacts of the measures that have been taken was not designed or intended to make people become irresponsible or conclude that it's over. It's unfortunate that some people concluded that way and somehow demonstrated some sort of indiscipline or irresponsibility. But again, we cannot say the government's measures were little or that they were bad simply because some people concluded that by softening some of the impact of these measures, that means it's all over. We understand that in a society as liberal and as free as ours, some people tend to draw conclusions, and sometimes they are wrong conclusions. These people who took it that because the government softened the measures, therefore
Corona is over.
Those people were wrong. And I think we should believe that why the government is insisting that we should remain on the measures that were originally taken, meaning the 13+7, we should understand that, again, while it is not yet endemic, but the challenge is there, is here. We cannot pretend. But at the same time, the government is conscious that as a state, we have to protect not only the health, our own health, but we also have to protect the future of these children.
Exactly.
These children.
Okay.
And that is why the measures are still on, and while the different sectors of education are there, I agree, as Dr. Imbo said, those who are in the higher education sector, they are mature enough, they might be able to handle it better than the little ones. But nevertheless, I think teachers generally are so conscientious that the teachers will do everything. Some teachers, I know they are so conscientious that some are even willing to sacrifice their lives to protect children. I know that's how serious teachers are in their belief in education. I believe that, as I heard the Minister of Secondary Education say this morning, she trusts the teachers. She believes that the teachers are ready, and she's willing to work with all the syndicates that are concerned about the various issues, as Dr. Imbo said earlier, and his colleague. I think that we are all in this together. But to say that the measures, we've done little, I think it's like...
we are implementing measures that have been recommended by the WHO and the government, taking into consideration our own realities. Now, the peculiarities of your own school and the measures that have been taken at the level of, let's say, taking the burden setting as an example.
Okay, thank you. You see, we are in a pandemic that is unprecedented. We've not experienced this before, and we are in kind of a war.
A war, not kind of.
It is a war that we cannot take off with the idea that we'll lose. That's why, like he said, there's no teacher who will sit there and be happy after having followed their student up to a certain point, and they just have some few days to end the year, and will give it. So that's why everybody's called upon to put their hands on deck to work together with what the pulse that government has given. At the level of BHSY, as I said, it's an entirely boarding school. Our upper students have come. They came yesterday, and the screening began at the entrance, at the gate. No parent was allowed to enter, and they did every screening, and the students have gone in. Each child is expected to come in with 7 masks. These masks, they're supposed to use 1 mask per day. Then, because the school, it's a school that the population is affordable, we can manage. Now we are using the entire school campus, sharing the students into 24, and at the entrance of each class, we have a washing place to wash your hands. They come in, their masks. We have arranged the class in such a way that there's a social distance between the blackboard where the teacher will stand and the students. Then we'll follow the
physical distance
between the teacher and the students. Then at the level of the dormitory, we have spaced the beds. The dormitory used to take 23 beds. Now you can have just about 10 to enable the students feel that this issue is serious. Then we have taken upon ourselves the program to talk to them every morning, prior to a class, that this issue depends on how they carry themselves around. Each student is expected to move around with their masks. Yeah. We sensitize them every day. We ensure at each post where they wash hands, there's somebody supervising. At the toilet, there's somebody. So we've done the little we can, just like we are expecting other schools to do, as a way to join our forces together to fight this pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah, we may say many things have not been done. Yeah, it's true, but we cannot fold our hands and sit on what has not been done. What have we done?
Okay.
Government has tried a little. Let the schools move ahead.
I'll come to you when Emmanuel says something. Yes.
Joe, permit me refer to this adage which says that if you are not courageous enough to speak the truth, you should not be courageous enough to tell lies. I think that is something we need to be very, very frank with. There is one truth, is that the pandemic we are moving from bad to worst.
Yes.
That is a fact which cannot be hidden. The unfortunate thing about it is that people turn around and everybody says government, 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 government. The government will not come to your house to tell your daughter to put on a mask to go to the market. Mm-hmm. Those who are even saying that schools should not resume, their children are in the street selling granules and whatever in the street. They are in the market selling mangoes and the rest. But they find fault in children going back to school. They don't find fault in releasing their kids to go to the market, to go to the churches, to go to the other areas. That is a fact which we must generally accept. Another thing we need to know, Joe, is that there is absolute need for a change of the narrative. The government was so linear to say that because Cameroonians have a lot of economic constraints, let the evening businesses go on, hoping that people will be responsible enough to understand that we are operating within a war-like situation. Unfortunately, some youths thought that it was a declaration that COVID has been cured.
Okay.
And people have gone viral. If you look at our neighborhoods, you go even to the market, the washing hand buckets that used to be in the intra-city, they have all disappeared. Masks have disappeared. People don't care in putting on masks again. Taxi drivers now want to recover the money which they did not recover during the total lockdown. Now bus drivers have gone viral. In fact, to be honest with you, Joe, this is not only about the education sector. It's about the change of mentality. What I would call there is an absolute need for a mental hygiene. Mm-hmm. People need to change their way of thinking.
Do you know that it's difficult to influence people to change their attitude within a short space of time?
It is difficult to. Now they have a choice. It is about survival of the fittest. And with survival of the fittest, you are solely responsible for your own survival.
Okay.
Because the government will not tell you, the government can only prescribe, make its recommendations, put the basics that it can put in place for you to move forward. Now it is a matter of choice. You have a choice to decide if you want to live or you want to die. Okay. It's up to you.
All right. Bayan, you wanted to chip in something?
Yes. We should stay on the point that this school resumption is necessary but very dangerous. To say the people share the blame with the government is not fair. The government owns the people. I don't know how political scientists like Professor Ngole would put it. But in times like this, especially this is a state of war, the government has to exercise certain powers. I believe that we consider that to the government. The government loves state authority at the time when we don't want it. I think here we needed the government to use state authority to regulate us. They refused to. And it's very dangerous.
Okay.
Because,
can I
because
ask you a
he talked
question?
about there was a time when we've never had a total lockdown. Other countries have acted and had a total lockdown. And it was reasonable to do. If we had had a lockdown in this country, we have wasted 2.5 months not doing that. It would have been normal. If we had had a lockdown for a month or 2 or 3, it would be okay to resume school, because this whole thing is not about not going back to school. It's about being sure that it is safe to go back to school. And we're going back to school at a time when it is not only not safe, but even worse. And it's getting worse. The PM said it yesterday. It's getting worse by the day.
Okay.
And we were at 1s and 2s and 3s. We went to 10s. We are at 100s per day. Okay. And we are going back to school.
Okay.
What is the guarantee? These kids are going to be in taxis. Half the taxi men are not wearing masks. If they're wearing it, they are chin masks and not face masks. If they are face masks, their mouth masks are not, and their noses are exposed. And you don't understand. So people, the problem with relaxing, Professor Ngole said it was a good thing. The problem with relaxing the barrier measures is psychologically, it gives the people the impression that it is over.
Is it not the fault
as difficult
of the ordinary Cameroonian who thought like that and not that of the government?
As difficult as it is for people to discipline themselves, when there is a whip, when there is an order, you saw it. When the government said we partially locked down, there was a partial lockdown. I entered a taxi and you could hardly hear people even conversing because people knew there was danger coming from the next person. But once this was relaxed, we went back to our dangerous old ways.
Okay.
The government is to blame for this. I think the government should mind our business. We have given the government, we considered this to the government, use some state authority, they refuse to. When we want to feel free, they bring the heavy stick. That is where there is a problem.
Okay. Yes, Professor.
With your permission, I was going to say that, as he has also said, there was a partial lockdown. You see, I mean, when it comes to decisions, official or government decisions, in a situation where the state has to show leadership and has to take charge, as he's saying, you know, you have to decide, you who is in the position of decision making, beginning with, of course, the head of the state and the head of the government and the other collaborators. You have to decide at what point, to what degree do you want to take away the freedoms, the ways of life, and the mentalities of people in order to lock them down fully to where they might feel like they have become prisoners. The danger about that is that, and it is a danger with all decision making, there is no decision making which does not carry a risk or a danger. The important thing about decision making is that he or they who are making the decision have to weigh
exactly
which kind of decision can have what impact or what effect. Because the worst thing that can happen in taking a decision is that because you want to save the lives of people, if they feel like they're being imprisoned or they feel like prisoners, the boomerang can be worse than what you expected. Exactly. You saw in the United States that some people actually came out against the lockdown or against the confinement and said to their state governors and to the others that they don't want this thing, they should stop. They want to have the freedom to carry out their affairs and they don't care about the lockdown or anything like that. You see, and in fact they were supported by the President of the United States. I'm sure you saw this because we all watch television. So in the case of Cameroon...
Crazy decisions by crazy people.
Yeah, but you saw this. People came out that they don't want it. So in the case of Cameroon, the first measures that were taken, 13 plus 7, after some time, lots of people expressed the fact that in different sectors, some people are feeling it negatively, like the buy-and sell.
I would prefer that we focus on back to school and not the measures government took, because we are moving now into measures which government has taken and not back to school. Let's allow us to come back to it.
Okay, let's get to the educational sector.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yes. Now, with the current dispensation, how should teachers behave?
I think given the current dispensation, teachers are better and will be better off behaving as their professional calling demands of them. That is to say, that conscience that they've got as teachers, that in the face of this danger, which is a danger which no one can deny, and given the measures that have been put in place by the state and implemented by the government, the teachers all have it as a duty, as a responsibility, working with everybody, parents and others, to ensure that, one, the lives of the teachers and the students are protected by ensuring that practical measures such as sanitizing, as he said earlier, and that these measures are followed, are implemented and respected. But that secondly, that in terms of educational, giving knowledge, the content.
Dispensing
yes,
knowledge.
To make sure that the children do not lose out. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, the worst thing you can do to a teacher is when at the end of the year, the teacher feels like he or she has done nothing for that young child.
Okay.
This is something which no teacher can sleep with,
okay.
From what I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you expect from parents?
We expect the collaboration of the parents, maximum collaboration. Now we are getting to a point, especially in the lycées, where the face masks will not be distributed for free. I wish I had the chance to plead with the government that another way to manage this crisis would have been to make the face masks and hand sanitizers free, especially for the primary and secondary school students. I wish I could. But now, owing that we have constraints, what will I say? What I will say is, like you rightly asked Prof. I think Prof highlighted a few topical issues. I think it is high time that the regime to start thinking of some risk allowance for teachers. We are in the worst situation. A teacher who used to teach 5 or 6 hours a week, and suddenly he finds himself and he has to teach 24 or 25 hours a week, he needs some kind of technical compensation. Sure. The teacher needs to be physically and financially and psychologically satisfied.
She and they, all of them, are at your disposal.
Yes.
Beautiful. So I wish and I hope that the minister is listening to us. Mrs. Minister, if you were to put some risk allowance at the disposal of the teachers, especially those who want to take the risks to perform this vocation, which they all opted to be part and parcel of, I think that is going to encourage the teachers a lot.
When soldiers go to war, they know that
of course they have gun allowances and the rest, and they have risk allowance and the rest.
I wonder whether there's something like a gun allowance.
Of course, it is high time that they should put that at the disposal of teachers as well. Yeah. It's going to be an extra motivation because there are some teachers who are not even willing to go back to class. So those who have taken the risks and the courage to be able to go back to class, they need some extra motivation.
Okay. What would you expect from a child that is going to school beginning tomorrow, be they the pupils or students?
They should know they're stepping out into the mouth of the lion. COVID-19 is worse than a lion. And it's an invisible lion. If you're facing a lion that you can see, it's likely to eat you up, but at least you will be able to dodge before it eats you up. Yeah. With COVID-19, you are embracing the lion. And that's very dangerous because it's not written on anybody's face. When people talked about HIV, AIDS, at a certain point you could see a patient has certain symptoms. The symptoms of COVID-19 are the things we've had all our lives. We sneeze, we have fever, and so on and so forth. So it's hard to distinguish them. You're going to be having your friend who has maybe contracted, but is not yet showing any symptoms, and you share things with them. Let me tell you something that happens, especially in primary schools and nursery schools. They share a lot of food.
Yeah, and drinks.
You give your kid that bottle of water. Every child says, let me suck. Yes. You give them that juice. Every child says, let me taste. And they don't have the attitude, I would say the culture, to say no, not because you are stingy, but because you want to put a barrier measure. What do you do in this situation? I'm afraid for the disaster.
Okay. It's good you speak to the children because sometimes it's important when you advise them also. And we used to, in our days, say this was said on radio, this was said on television. We didn't have television in our times. Now, your situation is a little bit peculiar, but what would you tell other children who will be going to school morning, afternoon, and shuttling between school and home? Because your case is a little bit peculiar since you have a confinement at the level of your college.
Okay, just as Mr. Bayana said, the presence of the pandemic is real. It is a war that we must be sensitized every day. Parents have a big role to play here, to remind their children of some habits that they know they have when they are together, and to let them know that you can no more behave this way because of the presence of this enemy. So a lot of sensitization is needed from parents, and we call on students or pupils some degree of responsibility. All the measures have been put in place. We expect them to respect those measures as much as they can.
Okay.
Remember, we can do only the little we can, because as we all know, it is getting to a more complicated phase. The ramifications are so many. But let us, to the best of our abilities, do our best.
Okay. Prof?
That's the important thing, as he said. We have to know, I mean, and I agree with all the panelists. I mean, Bahin said it is like a lion, which you don't see, but we see that it can eat you up, and there's nothing you can do about it. But as patriotic citizens, we all care about each other, and we all care about the future, especially of our young ones. We have to decide that no matter what, we have to overcome this, and we have to win the battle. Yes. And that for us to do it, as the head of state said in his speech the other day, we have to do it as one people, one nation. We're all together in this. And there is no...
Most especially, we shouldn't panic.
Yes, we have to be united.
Yes, Elvis Teke has just come in with reactions online. Elvis, good day and welcome back.
Thank you. Quite a good number of reactions as always. Mary Kilachin says, hi all. I think the measures of washing hands, avoiding gatherings is good, and for students, more workers should be employed at the entrance of classes and schools to ensure that the measures are respected. And from homes, parents should afford all necessary equipment and before waiting for government assistance. Joe Waters says, in order to manage our schools amid the pandemic, we need to disinfect classrooms every evening and every day of school, and tests should be effective at the entrance of every school, and regular washing of hands points made available. He also says for the SDF at 30, SDF has become a sleeping dog or a dead lion. It's been fighting for federalism transition, but it has achieved nothing. But happy anniversary for the SDF. And Joachim Augustine says parents have 80% responsibility. As for preventive measures, begin at home, and the rest will be done at school. And Boko Paxson says, to me, COVID-19 management should be more ever before all-encompassing, starting from parents before getting to children and schools. And for SDF at 30, the stakes have changed, just like the political landscape, and there's need for a complete overhaul of the party's ideology. And we will conclude with Kang Jo, who says parents should start the prevention by providing masks and hand sanitizers, and school authorities should be meticulous in managing and disinfecting schools.
Thank you so much, Elvis. And I'd like us to, you've said the essentials about education. Maybe we have a few minutes just to say one or two things about the SDF at 30. I'll come back. The guest I wanted on the program from the SDF could not make it, so we could shift that to next week. But maybe you'd want to say something about the SDF at 30. It was a topical issues in the newspapers this week, even though we didn't have the review.
The SDF has played its role. If we are here and talking the way we are talking and going away with it freely, it is thanks to the SDF to a certain level.
Okay.
You cannot expect... The problem I always have with Cameroonians is they think that Frundi 30 years after should be the Frundi that was in the 1990s. It is not done anywhere. Frundi played his role as a political activist at the time in which he was at his brim. Frundi has degenerated, he has fossilized in terms of ideas, he has had conflicts, but he has played his role, he has written his name in the history of Cameroon. There's no way anybody can wipe it. He just did what he had to do when he had the opportunity to do it.
Sam Nujoma, with his SWAPO, survived over decades and stood tall over the decades until he led his people to independence in 1990. Time shouldn't be a factor to excuse the failures or the way out of certain individuals. I'm not blaming Frundi, he has played a role. And this is not about Frundi, it's about the SDF. They need to go back to the drawing board. It's lost focus. It doesn't know whether it's fighting to change Cameroon, or whether it's fighting to champion the cause of Anglophones, or whether it wants power, or it simply wants to share from the goodies of power. They were very good friends with Professor Ngolengole.
Okay. The SDF at 90,
what I would say about
as a political scientist.
As a political scientist is that, you know, when a political party is created, it is created as a private association, but a private association with a political agenda. And the SDF has, in 30 years, proved that it was made up of men and women who had an idea and who had the courage to make that idea materialize in Cameroon. And in 30 years, we have to give them credit that they did make that contribution. And what I see, again, as you say, as a political scientist, is that if there's one success that we should give to the SDF, it is that apart from the courage that they've shown, the SDF has succeeded in avoiding being the victim of extremist currents within the party, and also the SDF has avoided putting itself in the corner of looking like an Anglophone party, or a party meant for Anglophones. I think we have to give credit to the party for that, because as we know in political science, one thing you should avoid as a political party, because you have a political agenda, even though you're a private association, is that be careful that you don't put yourself in the corner by allowing yourself to be victims of extremism, or those who believe in cornering you to a small corner, a partisan or linguistic or regional corner. And I think the SDF has succeeded to avoid this. Okay. Yes, I think we should give that credit. So in 30 years, they have something to celebrate.
Okay.
Yes. One thing I hail the SDF for is their courage. They came in at a time when it wasn't the talk of the town that another party would stand with CNU or CPDM. They came with courage, and they have survived for 30 years. It's something to comment.
All right.
It's true.
I know that it's very difficult to talk about somebody when he is not here, so we'll push this forward. Another thing which happened within the week, which was very, which struck the news, was the death of Mola Njoli Tumbe.
Wow.
What do you remember about him?
Mola was a very, very fine politician, level-headed and very focused in his vision, his thoughts, especially as far as the Southern Cameroonian cause is concerned. I personally did not know him in person because I was a very young man when he was in the course of his battles, but I had the privilege to have read a lot of he wrote. And I want to say that the Southern Cameroonians have lost a very fine politician. Okay. Very level-headed and very decent in the way he does things.
Dies.
I'm not tribalistic, but let me say that's an improbable Bakweri man. The people of Fako Division, the Bakweri people, seem to have learned their lessons from what many consider the failures of EM Elendeli, which nearly ostracized them from the center of power in Cameroon. If you see all of the agitations around Ambazonia, southern Cameroons and stuff, you hardly have seen people from Fako, from Bakweri land involved. But this was one wise patriarch who, in spite of where he comes from, in spite of what others might have learned as lessons, still stood for the truth, upheld it very objectively, very clearly, fearlessly, never insulting anybody, making his point, and stood on his position until he died. Okay. He's a man to be hailed.
Prof?
Yes, I mean, may he so rest in peace. I have, you know, the memory I have of late Mola Njoli Tumbe is that this was an accountant, a successful runner accountant who became a political activist and a political actor, and believed in his ideas, even if the ideas were not shared by many people. But in particular, what I remember about him was that during the tripartite in 1991, at a certain point, over the issue of what age, the voting age, there were two currents of thought. One was that Cameroonians can vote as from 18, and the other was that Cameroonians could vote at 21. And it was so heated that you would not believe, and I can share this because I participated in the tripartite conference. It was none other than the leader of an opposition party, Molanjoli Tumbe, who put up his hand and asked Prime Minister Ayatu, may so rest in peace also, to say, may I make a suggestion? And he suggested that, could we make it at 20? And guess what? It was adopted.
That was the consensus.
It is part of the Constitution, the consensus. So the consensus can come from the opposition, because he was the leader of the opposition.
Okay.
It is in our Constitution.
All right. Martin?
Yes, I know Mr. Litumbe was a fine politician. I grew in Buya. I always remember Hotel Memos, which is one of his, and Fagoship. So he had been so instrumental in the after-independence life of the Bakori man. So I want to believe that we are losing a very, very useful patriot amongst that section of the country. And we hope that there are some who are following his footsteps and will cause us to always remember his style of politics.
Okay.
Joe, if I just want to add something to what he said.
You already said what you were supposed to say.
One thing that Mola will be noted for is the fact that
Remembered for,
sorry, is the fact that irrespective of his political ideologies, Mola never thought that violence was an option to putting his political agenda.
Thank you so much. We will have to call it quit at this level. Our time is up. And
about George Floyd?
Okay, George Floyd. That is very far away from us, but maybe you wanted through a word. We have just about 30 seconds.
America should prove to us that they are the United States of America.
America today
should prove to us that they are the United States of America.
Okay. Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us on the program this midday. We hope we entertained you with our debate. Stay with us if you can. CRTV Tam Tam will be coming up shortly, and on CRTV News, the news continues.